Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. Guest is joining me right now. He's Mr. Femi Oladehin. He is the senior partner at Argentile Capital Partners. Hello, Femi, and welcome. Bright and early Monday to you.
Hi, Nancy. Confirm you can hear me clearly. It's
Yes,
an
I
absolute pleasure to be with you again.
yes I can confirm. I can hear you clearly. Now, Femi, let's start with this. The Minister of Information and National Orientation just a few days ago said that Nigeria's economy is not distressed. Let's begin from that point. What do you think? Are we in an economic crisis?
So, look, I think that the government is always going to take a perspective that probably is different from the perspective of the average Nigerian. Now, if you look at some of the hard data that have come out, and I've seen that being touted by government, GDP growth in 2025, in 2023 was positive, probably about 2.83%. They would also use the performance of the Nigerian stock market as a good matrix. However, if you were asking the average Nigerian on the streets if they felt that the quality of their lives was better in 2023 than prior years, I think the first response you would get would be probably mixed. But I think majority of the people would say that their lives are worse off. So if you're using government speak, it is reach for the minister or for the spokesperson to conclude that Nigeria is not in an economic crisis. But we all economists know that all of the variables show us that this has probably been the worst economic performance that this country has had since the early 90s. And we can look at all the metrics to verify that. So, are we in a crisis? Maybe a crisis doesn't describe it, but definitely in a very difficult economic environment.
I liked your analysis because when the minister also mentioned same, I had to look at the numbers again, and I said in my mind, I said the numbers are telling me a different story from what you're saying, and
Absolutely.
and my pockets are feeling, are feeling weighed by pressures of a hard economic environment. In fact, a few people have said that we are not in renewed hope times. This is renewed hardship for Nigeria. Yes, I've heard that. And I really want to ask you this from what you just said, that perhaps this is what the worst time we're passing through as an economy. What would you say about the last 8 years of Buhari when we had two recessions, one pandemic, GDP growth? Of course, we had recessions, two recessions, so that means we
Mm.
had negative economic growth. What is the difference between then and now? Because people are even saying that Buhari's time now is better. I don't know why in Nigeria, any president that comes is always worse off than the last one. It, so from your own analysis, yes.
So look, Nancy, I would say that we all know that the Buhari government was probably the worst government
It
that
was a
we had seen
disaster.
in a long time.
Yes.
And the problems were both monetary and fiscal. And I think that's why the Buhari's government is probably seen in a worse light. Now, the challenges we've had in the last 8 months um, would would make people forget the difficulties that the Buhari government actually created. And to a large extent, like I say to people, that the challenges we are experiencing now are actually a direct fallout of the incompetence of the Buhari government. And I think that there is no debate about that. Monetary policy was a big problem. The naira became, a currency that was printed in unprecedented levels. Not even the military regimes of Babangida and Abacha printed as much naira as the Buhari government did. And in addition to that, of course, we had COVID-19. So you could always say that, look, there were external factors that impacted probably the first term towards the beginning of the second term. However, I think that the foundations for a terrible economy were already laid during his first term when he came in, reversed some of the policies that we had seen during the Jonathan era, um, and and started to almost took Nigeria back to a socialist economy where businesses were struggling with the sort of policies, and we had literally, a finance minister, if I recall. I can't even remember her name. That was how irrelevant she was in the scheme of things. And you just had literally had an economy that was running on autopilot without any form of clear policies. Now, if you juxtapose that against the current government, who have actually been very aggressive and active on the policy front, you would say that perhaps there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Even though I think that some of those policies could have been better thought through, some of those policies should have had significantly more dialogue around them before they are announced. And then you would actually then be able to say that there is significant acceptance by the people or by average Nigerians of of what the future is going to look like. So, I mean, I think comparing this government to the Buhari government, it would always make this government look like very competent. I think the benchmark should always go back to the Obasanjo and Jonathan regimes, where Nigeria obviously had, proper leaders and economic teams who understood economics and made policies on the basis of that.
Now, Femi, do you have a sense of Tinubu's economic agenda? I've read I've read a lot of stuff that has come out from this administration, even pre-election, the economic agenda, the renewed hope agenda, and all. I've read it back to back and all of that. But with what I'm seeing right now, I don't know if you struggle with a sense, making a sense of what President Tinubu's economic agenda is, especially with all the pronouncements that have been done. Sometimes he will make this pronouncement, he will go back. Take a look at the one on customs, the one on, is it foreign expatriates?
Expatriate
Yes,
quotas.
yes, a whole lot of them. Fuel subsidy is gone. Now there is subsidy going on, and even at a higher cost. So I'm struggling to know what President Tinubu's economic agenda is. Is it neoliberal? I don't understand.
So actually, and in fairness to this government, I think there is some level of clarity as to how they see the economy running.
Okay.
They've been very clear that they like a pro-market economy. They've been very clear that they want market forces to play a more active role in the way the economy evolves. The challenges they've had, again, honestly, in fairness, is that they inherited a dire economic situation. And it's meant that even when their policies have come out with the best of intentions, the actual performance of the economy or the overhang, the hangover of Buhari's policies means that the effects of the policies are either negatively impacting on the people or they drag on growth and expansion. So I would say that there is a clarity in terms of what they want to do. There is a clarity in terms of the outcomes that they're looking for. However, the policy pathway and the policy decisions that need to be taken and how and when those decisions need to be taken is probably where we're seeing some form of lag. Now, in fairness, Nancy, 8 months is a very short time to start to benchmark or to start to ask questions about economics. We all know that they're leading and they're lagging indicators.
Femi,
when it comes to
I may
economic
disagree
analysis.
with you a bit there. If you say 8 months is a short time,
Yes.
because we also saw that during Buhari's days,
It is, though.
8 months was a long time, and 8 months down the line actually gave us 8 years of suffering. If you can remember, when did Buhari come in? 2015, yes, he didn't appoint his people.
2015.
Yes, and Nigeria began to nosedive from that time. So I slightly disagree with you if you're telling me that 8 months is such a short time. Because 8 months is enough time to put a foundation together. If you go back to the US, during Obama days, when we had the financial, 8 months was such a long time, Femi. 8 months can actually cascade you into either progress or, retrogression.
Yes. So Nancy, you're actually making my argument, believe it or not. You're helping me make my argument.
Because I heard that 8 months is a short time.
Here is my point. No, it is actually. In fairness, it is. I would say this to you, with the exception of the exchange rate liberalization and the removal of policy. The truth is that we haven't really seen the impact of any of the major policies that the Tinubu government has brought brought into the country. So let me give you an example. Food security. We've only had one harvest cycle under this government, and so you would understand that the economic crisis that we have today is not a fallout of this government, especially when it comes to food prices. The foundations of that started under the Buhari government with a lax security infrastructure, farmers not being able to go to the farms. And the impact is that when the harvest season started in August of last year, the farmers literally had nothing to harvest. And the impact of that is what we are feeling today. So it's important that we understand that policies take time to actually filter through into the system, even though there are some policies that have immediate impacts. And I've alluded to that, the currency and fuel prices. However, there are certain things that this government is starting to do that gives us hope that at least there is a clarity in terms of the direction. And I think that's where Nigerians should understand now that there is clarity in terms of direction, whether it's positive or negative. At the end of the day, businesses can actually plan. We now understand what the central bank is trying to do, not the confusion we had under Emefiele. This central bank governor has been consistent in his message that his focus is on price stabilization and inflation targeting. We never had that sort of rhetoric. I mean, we had a CBN governor that was willing to fight Aboki effects. So let's place them, in the same bucket. This government has inherited a very difficult economic environment. Unfortunately, in the rush to show that they were working, they made announcements that was bereft of analysis. I think they've learned significant lessons from that. Well, you might argue that the last one on explicit quotas shows that probably they haven't. But I believe that the foundations that are being laid now, if there is a consistency, if there is better, and this is very important, is if there is better deliberation and dialogue around their policies, if there is better dialogue with the private sector, if there's better dialogue with the key economic drivers, you would start to see those things filter through into the market. And that's where the argument has to be that where I think this government has also struggled is being able to communicate its ideas to Nigerians without being verbose and without being defensive. That has been a major problem. So the information special advisor coming to tell Nigerians that we're not in an economic crisis is at best ridiculous. The reality is that to the average Nigerian, we're in an economic crisis because the prices have gone up. We had this conversation about the Federal Office of Statistics or the National, their Statistics Office. And I've always said that their inflation numbers are fraudulent. It's as simple as that. And if you're basing economic policy on data that is flawed, then you're curing an illness with a wrong palliative. And that's where we should be focusing our attention on, so that when the data itself is correct and true, then the policies that policymakers come up with are reflective of the reality. So you use the US as an example. President Biden inherited an inflation in the US that was closer to 10%, 11%. Today, US inflation has moderated down to 2%. Why? Because the data and the economic policies were targeted. But remember that inflation didn't come down to 2% in 6 months. It took a couple of periods for it to happen. There was actually a direct targeted intervention by the US government towards targeting inflation. So that's what we should be looking at for Nigeria in solving these long-term problems that are more systemic rather than even transient.
Okay, Femi, with your analysis now, how long will you tell Nigerians to be patient? Because even the federal government has told us to be patient. The patience capital, that patience capital, how long should we have it? From now till when? Before we begin to see a stabilization, then we can talk of consolidation, then we can talk of acceleration, like the NESG put it in their report a few weeks ago.
So honestly, Nancy, when I tell people to be patient, I think it should be qualified. The truth is that the average Nigerian wants to see their life get better now. Our life expectancy is 52.
Yeah.
And if you use that as a
And women,
basis,
we live longer than you guys.
well, you know,
Ours is higher than you guys.
that's why
I
we
think
have
for men it's
three
about
Mother's
49.
Days. That's why we have three Mother's Days and we only have one Father's Day. You know,
Yeah.
but on a serious note, though, Nancy, the truth here is Nigerians want to see the direct impact of those policies in their paycheck.
Yeah.
They want to see it in the fact that they have, resources to be able to weather the storm, to be able to feed the children, to be able to pay the children's school fees. And the problem is that the government, again, is probably making the same mistakes that prior governments in Nigeria have been making. Nigeria's problems are they are systemic problems, not transient problems. We have a productivity challenge. You're trying to bring in products. You want to get to the Nigerian port system, your products basically get stuck. There's so much inefficiency that's priced into the Nigerian system that even if you had the best policies, without resolving those strategic and systemic issues, you're always going to find yourself in a situation whereby those policies don't have long-term impact. So what I was expecting to hear from this government that I haven't heard is a clear Marshall Plan towards ensuring that first we fix the problems in the Niger Delta. We are continuing to struggle with crude oil production simply because of a lack of investment and because of the lack of security. We're struggling with food production because of a lack of investment and a lack of security. Our transport infrastructure is probably the worst that it's been in recent human history. So there are basic dislocations that are happening in the economy that need to be fixed. If you look at even the transportation of agricultural products and produce, what we've lost, what we lose during the harvest period just because of a lack of storage and transportation, all of those things feed into the direct impact that these things have on the lives of average Nigerians. And if I was advising this government, that's exactly what I would be telling them to focus on. Nigeria should be discussing today a Marshall Plan of ensuring that we can improve productivity, of ensuring that we can reduce the level of loss and leakages in the system, so that when companies are investing, they're getting proper returns for their investment, and as such, they can pass on those savings to their customers. However, if what we're just doing is, we're going to increase interest rates, or we're going to, announce tax holidays for gas, we're going to do this. Those things do not respond as quickly as we expect them to without solving the fundamental infrastructural deficits that have been the bigger problem that we have in the economy.
So now that brings me to the question on trade. I don't know if you saw the statistics that was just released a few days ago by the MBS. Total trade for the last quarter of 2023, 26.8 trillion naira. Of course, if we take a look at the deficit, we're still having about 1.4 trillion naira. Import at 14.1 trillion and export at 12.6 trillion. What does this story say? And I don't know if you read it very well. We're still, of course, importing quite a lot. So you also take a look at machineries and all of that. Oil also is major. So the talk about diversification is not even reflecting in our numbers, even as of 2023.
Yes. And so that, Nancy, so the trade numbers for me, perhaps easily again reflect the challenges that we've been talking about. Now, to produce one slice of bread in Nigeria, compared to probably every other African country, is significantly more expensive. So, which means that even from an export perspective, despite the devaluation of the naira, we're still struggling to be competitive when it comes to export. And the reason why we have that problem is because we have a structural deficiency in our economy, a structural deficiency that makes sure that on a productivity basis, we're always going to be suffering. We probably have one of the worst productivity matrices in the market, at least across the African region, and that is where the problem is. We've been talking about diversification since when I was in secondary school, which was 33 years ago. Till today, we still have a situation where our major export is still crude oil. And guess what? Our major import is a derivative of the crude oil that we've been exporting. So again, that just tells you that we're a completely inefficient economy. So you see, when we become serious as a country, those conversations will be had. And those conversations will be around how do we improve productivity? How do we ensure that the average Nigerian is productive and is using the resources available to him in the most efficient way to ensure that the cost of delivering products and services in Nigeria is lower relative to our current wages? You must understand that our current wages are probably the lowest in the world. The average Nigerian is earning what, $10, $15, $20 as their monthly income. So you have that, but we still have an economy that is very high on non-productive imports. We're importing petrol that literally we're burning away for no productivity. We're importing diesel that we're using to run our industries when we should be generating power with the gas that we have. We're importing products that ordinarily we should be able to produce in Nigeria because of our lower labor costs. Again, it goes back to efficiency.
Now, let me come back to something that you said, and this is also something that I've been thinking about. We have a cost of living crisis, of course, high inflation, so many things that all of us in the country are really feeling. Do you think that there's also a cost of doing business crisis? Because when I sat down and I was really thinking about it, and I said, nobody's also taking a look at the ease, the cost of doing business now, not even the ease. The ease, we all know what we face in the country. But there's already a cost of doing business crisis that is brewing, that all of us are just focused on the cost of living crisis. And what do I mean? When I sit down and I think, and I, of course, do my own analysis, I said, many businesses are closing down right now. MSMEs that have physical stores are shutting down. Many of them are going online. And what does all this mean? They are right-sizing or downsizing or sacking staff. I know how many companies in the last 1 or 2 months, their owners that I've spoken to, and they said, Nancy, I just can't deal anymore. Those that are in businesses cannot deal with the high inflationary pressures. They buy a good today, they're selling this thing for 10 naira now. When you go back, it's 15 naira. They can't even go back to the market again with that 15 naira, as it were. So they really need to buckle up in some areas. So do you think there's a cost of doing business crisis? That's on one hand. Secondly, Femi, yesterday I went to a supermarket in the evening to buy bread because my son loves bread. And I bought bread for 1,500 naira. The bread, that 1,500 naira used to give me 2 loaves of bread. Is it 2 loaves? Yes, 2 loaves of bread. And for those that take sachet water, you can still buy sachet water with the change. But now, I bought bread for 1.5, at least the one that I bought yesterday. So people eat bread that's higher than 1.5. So, and I know that I will go back again like in the next 2 or 3 days to buy. So what does that actually also tell you, buttressing the fact of what I'm saying in terms of cost of doing business crisis, and no one is taking a look at that?
No, I mean, Nancy, again, we're going back to the same conversations that we've always had. The problem is, I always say this, as an economy, we always struggle when our policy make business owners or have never been business. I've always had a problem with it. If you're an economics minister and all of that, I want to know how many businesses have you built? So do you understand the challenges that a business owner has, and are you able to respond to it? If you look at Lagos State, for example, probably the worst when it comes to policies and when it comes to the ease of doing business, multiple taxes, multiple interventions, multiple sorts of, challenges that business owners need to deal with. Now, when you put that in the perspective of a consumer, you can see it immediately when you go to the market that your 1,500 naira is now buying something less than it was buying last year. Probably is even by half of what last year. For businesses, it's more difficult. You see, because for business, there is a lag between when the cost actually happens and when they're able to adjust it. So let me give you an example. Announced an increase in its prices in February, last month, February. But increase in prices of the input costs been happening for 3 months prior. So this always are going to respond later time than consumers can feel that impact. That itself creates a problem and a conundrum. Now, cost of doing business is a major issue. Now, to remember that the Nigerian manufacturer over the last 30 years has been producing its own power, consistently investing in diesel generators or maybe gas generators, but they cannot rely on the government power to produce what it is they're producing. That in itself is a cost of doing business that other countries are not having to contend with. You then have the manpower challenge that we have. Now, let me give you another example. In the last 3 years, Japan has come its prime of its middle class. In terms of skills, in terms of exposure, we've lost all of those people. That is a cost of doing business. Businesses have people that are less experienced and probably at a higher cost. These are real life issues that businesses are having to deal with, and the government is oblivious of. There is no Nigerian port that has been announced in the last 5 years, Nancy, and I stand to be corrected, that was targeted at keeping the middle class Nigeria back in Nigeria so that we help rebuild this economy. In care because they were happy that they were losing educated voters who probably wouldn't have voted for them. Those are challenges that we have to deal with on a regular basis as big, and these things have a direct impact on the performance of.
Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.